Since my early years, I yearned for the tranquility of a typical, harmonious family. My upbringing was unconventional, devoid of the presence of biological parents or blood relatives. As a child, I found solace under the care of my foster parents, even though we lacked a blood connection. My deepest desire was to belong to a family I could proudly call my own. A doting aunt, a loving husband, a child sharing my lineage, and me, all united with smiles. That was the family I envisioned. When I heard that my then-boyfriend proposed, I was genuinely elated. I believed this was my chance to build the family I had always envisioned. Little did I know that beneath the dreamy happiness lay an unexpected misfortune. After my regular workday, my husband, Tom, would command me with a sense of entitlement, as if it were the natural order of things. "Hey, Emily, my man and Catherine are hungry. Hurry up and make dinner," became a daily routine. Neither Tom, my mother-in-law, nor my sister-in-law ever contributed to household chores or showed any intention to do so. I am Emily, a 29-year-old working for a prominent company. I had envisioned a family quite different from the one I ended up with. Tom, my 30-year-old husband, had worked at the same company as me initially. Although he was a year older, he had taken a gap year before entering college, so we joined the company simultaneously. However, Tom had since resigned from his sales position after a conflict with his boss. While he placed the blame squarely on his boss, the reality appeared to tell a different story. My career continued within the same company, where I worked diligently in the general affairs department, handling administrative tasks for the entire company. Thanks to my commitment, I had earned the trust of my colleagues and superiors, often being entrusted with additional responsibilities. One day, the head of Tom's sales department sought my advice. I felt uneasy as I had limited interaction with the sales team. With an exasperated tone, the manager said, "I assume you're aware because you're his wife, but Tom recently expressed his desire to quit the job." This was the first I had heard of it, and I inquired if there had been a serious issue prompting such a decision. The manager explained that Tom had frequently left work unfinished, expecting others to complete his tasks. Moreover, he had unfairly shifted his workload onto his colleagues who felt powerless to resist. Instead of showing remorse when confronted, Tom had grown defiant. He even falsely claimed that we share household chores evenly and needed to return home early because of his supposedly ailing mother and sister. The manager, reluctant to meddle in personal matters, had insisted that Tom complete his work, but the burdened colleague was on the verge of resigning. Finally, the manager had to tell Tom that family is important, but he also had a responsibility to complete his work properly. Upon hearing this, Tom, unable to have his way, decided to quit. I must admit that I felt a sense of relief when Tom expressed his desire to quit. It was evident that Tom's behavior at work had been disruptive and troublesome. Even though he was not thriving in his role, every warning from the manager had led to further defiance. Upon learning the truth about Tom's work attitude, I apologized profusely and expressed my regret for the trouble he had caused everyone in the sales department. The manager, observing my response, assured me that it wasn't my fault or responsibility. In fact, he was exasperated by Tom's major decision without consulting his spouse. With genuine concern, the manager asked, "Is it true that his mother and sister are unwell and that he helps with household chores?" I had to admit that these stories were fabrications. His mother-in-law and sister-in-law were not sick, and Tom had never once contributed to housework. Tom became unemployed by his own doing, and despite his optimism about finding another job, reality proved less kind. Repeated job rejections during interviews led Tom to believe that his former boss was spreading unfavorable rumors about him to other companies, which he held a grudge against. However, I knew my own company did not engage in such underhanded tactics. Normally, when submitting a resignation letter, one should stay at the company for at least a month for a proper handover of responsibilities. Tom, on the other hand, handed in his resignation letter to the manager and left on the same day. No company would want to hire someone who behaved in such a manner. Casually, Tom gave his mother and sister a meager severance pay, feeling self-satisfied. He had grown up in a single-parent household, and his only sister was capable of working, but both of them chose not to. Consequently, I ended up shouldering all the household chores and even their living expenses. Handling everything by myself naturally became challenging. When I asked Tom to lend a hand, his response was always a shout, "You're my wife, right? My mother and Catherine are my precious family. Isn't it natural for a wife to serve her family?" But the concept of serving the family didn't align with my perspective. So I pushed back. "I can understand your mother's situation, but can't Catherine at least get a part-time job? She's only 23, right? Catherine, who was 7 years younger than Tom, enjoyed a privileged position in his heart, possibly due to her age. Catherine frequently took advantage of Tom, constantly asking for pocket money and spending it extravagantly. Even when Tom became unemployed, Catherine's demands for money persisted. When I refused, Tom felt compelled to start working part-time, managing packages for a delivery service. Tom apparently told his coworkers and neighbors that he left his prestigious job because his family was ill and required his care. To maintain appearances and secure his family's well-being, he wove an intricate web of lies. The salary he earned from his part-time job went straight to Catherine, who used it for her leisure activities. Catherine, on the other hand, began socializing with men she met, all the while avoiding household chores or any form of employment. As for my mother-in-law, unbelievably, she began taking money from my purse. I reached my breaking point and informed Tom about her actions, expecting his support. To my surprise, he grew angry with me instead. "Hey, you're my wife, there's nothing wrong with that. She's my mother, and you should take better care of her. This is why you're single with no relatives," he scolded me, as if I were the one in the wrong. His mother even added her mocking commentary, "Oh, Emily, you're so petty." These heartless daily interactions persisted until one day, I experienced a life-changing encounter. After finishing work and completing my routine grocery shopping, I returned home to find unfamiliar men's shoes at the entrance. The size indicated they were larger than Tom's, suggesting a male guest. As I entered the living room, a young man with bright brown hair, a handsome face, and a tall stature emerged. He appeared as if he had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. I assumed that Catherine had brought her boyfriend over and was prepared to pretend I hadn't noticed. But the young man surprised me by apologizing. "I'm sorry, I was going to go out with Catherine, but I'll pretend it never happened." Although he initially gave off a playboy vibe, his demeanor was surprisingly polite and sensible. As he prepared to leave and placed his shoes neatly at the entrance, I mustered the courage to ask for his name. "Excuse me, I'm Catherine's sister-in-law, Emily. May I ask your name?" Upon my introduction, he looked at me and smiled warmly, though his demeanor remained casual. He introduced himself, saying, "Nice to meet you. My name is Robert, and I work as a bartender." Catherine was a regular at my bar. As he spoke, his smile seemed to brighten. It turned out that Catherine had asked him out on a date initially, and he had considered accepting. However, he eventually declined after Catherine got drunk and revealed her true nature. "My sister-in-law is ugly and stingy. The money I have is what my brother earned from his part-time job because she's such a wife. She makes him do everything around the house," Robert explained, sharing the terrible stories he had heard about me. He expressed regret for not being mature enough to view women differently. Despite everything, Robert couldn't leave Catherine alone in her inebriated state, so he escorted her home and even covered her taxi fare. Unfortunately, Tom and my mother-in-law were out on this particular day, leaving Robert with no choice but to retrieve the house keys from the inebriated Catherine and guide her to the living room. Robert assured me, "I couldn't just leave her at the front door. I promise I didn't steal anything." He explained that he worked as a bartender trainee at night and attended vocational school during the day. Catherine had summoned him right after his classes ended, claiming she worked at a luxury brand store, a lie that Robert had fallen for. Robert nearly fell for her deception but eventually realized her true nature, despite his charming appearance. He mentioned that his bright brown hair was entirely natural, although people often commented on its uniqueness. He handed me his business card from the bar where he worked before bidding farewell, mentioning that he was heading to his job. I expressed my gratitude for bringing Catherine home, and he smiled before quickly departing. Normally, if a man with a connection to Catherine entered our home without permission, I would have called the police without hesitation. However, something about meeting Robert had instilled in me an instinctual trust in his sincerity and integrity. I genuinely believed it was fortunate that he didn't pursue a relationship with Catherine after discovering her true character. Upon entering the living room, I found Catherine still heavily intoxicated. Despite her hindrance, I covered her with a blanket to prevent her from catching a cold. Catherine stirred but remained incoherent, talking about Robert being her boyfriend with brown hair and how handsome he was. She even shouted after checking her smartphone. Robert had clearly communicated to the intoxicated Catherine that he couldn't date her, but it seemed futile. Drunken and experiencing memory loss, Catherine didn't grasp Robert's feelings. However, he had wisely sent her a proper email to decline her advances. Unfortunately, Catherine had no recollection of her true behavior while inebriated and believed she had been rejected by Robert. She began sobbing and ranting, wondering why he had abandoned her, seemingly oblivious to the fact that she had revealed her true self. It became evident that Catherine was the one who had been pretending to be someone she wasn't, and Robert was the true victim in this situation. Ignoring her, I proceeded to prepare dinner. Upon Tom and my mother-in-law's return, they were taken aback by Catherine's cheerful anger as she recounted her version of events. Tom became furious, accusing Robert of toying with Catherine and vowing to confront him. Concerned for Robert, I foresaw potential trouble and was beginning to worry when Catherine suddenly turned her attention to me, questioning whether I had said something unnecessary to Robert. She displayed a message on her smartphone implying that I had exposed her true nature to him. I sighed and clarified the situation, explaining that I had merely encountered Robert at the entrance when I returned home, and he had helped Catherine in her drunken state. Hearing this, Tom distanced himself from me, clicking his tongue in frustration. In an attempt to change Catherine's mood, Tom decided to order premium sushi for dinner without consulting me. The cost of this deluxe meal came from my earnings, yet he only ordered for 3. When the sushi arrived, they ignored the dinner I had painstakingly prepared and began enjoying the sushi, leaving me excluded. I reluctantly ate the dinner I had cooked alone, while the 3 of them chuckled and made comments on the side. They remarked about how delicious it was to have a family meal, how much better it tasted compared to the usual fare, and how their typical food was unappetizing. Tom's words held a hint of mockery, and the mother-in-law joined in with her commentary. I listened to their laughter, suppressing my emotions and feeling a profound emptiness. Was this the kind of family I had yearned for? It all seemed utterly ridiculous. Amidst this turmoil, the face of the guardian who had raised me, the only family I had known before getting married, came to my mind. We had lost touch after I got married. For some reason, I also remembered Robert's genuine smile. A few days later, a new opportunity presented itself. On my day off from work while cleaning the house, Tom approached me with a cash card in hand. Panic coursed through me upon seeing the cash card. It contained the money I had diligently saved bit by bit before getting married. Tom, however, was elated, holding the cash card as if he had won a prize. He declared, "I've decided to give the $68,000 you saved to my mom and Catherine. If you object, I will divorce you." I had saved that money with the hope of using it for our children when they were born. I had believed that if we had children, Tom would naturally distance himself from his mother and Catherine. However, Tom bluntly rejected my dream of having children, stating, "I'm not interested in kids. My mom and Catherine are more important. Use the money however you want." I had always believed I could build a simple and happy family, but now I realized it was an impossible dream. Quietly, I presented the divorce papers to Tom, thinking he might be taken aback. However, he promptly filled them out with a sense of liberation, exclaiming, "It's over. I'm free from this man." Ignoring Tom's jubilation over the money, I began packing my belongings to leave the house. After gathering my things and departing, I submitted the divorce papers to the city hall, and they were accepted without issue. Following the divorce, I returned to my foster father's home. He was often away due to his demanding work schedule, so it felt like living on my own. When I called him to inform him of the divorce, he listened patiently and replied, "You've held it tough. Come back home soon." Reflecting on our estrangement and the fact that I had repaid his kindness with rebellion, I was moved that he had forgiven me without uttering a word. Back home and spending time alone, various memories from my childhood resurfaced. I recalled the time when my foster father had picked me up from the children's home and brought me to this house. Back then, my mother-in-law was alive and treated me as her own daughter. However, her passing during my junior high school years marked the start of my rebellion against my foster father. He too had a demanding job that often took him away, leaving me with a void that I filled with rebellion. Looking back now, I realized that my foster father had cared for me just as much as my mother-in-law did. I had always yearned for a normal family, but I had forgotten the love of the person closest to me who had always cherished me. With the divorce and nothing left, I hoped to find peace without any more worries or stress. I worked even harder than before. During this time, I unexpectedly crossed paths with Robert once again. One day, after finishing work, I was waiting for the elevator when I encountered the sales department manager. As I was about to greet him, he spoke first, saying, "Hi, you've had your share of challenges, but you look much better than before. I'm glad." The manager was aware of my divorce with Tom, and she praised me for my hard work. I thanked him, and as we entered the elevator together, he approached me with a request. He mentioned a popular bar in the sales department and revealed that he was curious about it but not particularly fond of alcohol. Given my knowledge of bars, he asked if I'd accompany him. I knew the manager to be a sincere and reliable person, so I agreed to go to the bar with him. The bar he had heard about from his subordinate was an underground spot known for its chic and cool atmosphere, popular among young people. As we entered the bar, the manager, clearly out of his comfort zone, whispered that he was nervous. He gently pushed open the door, revealing the stylish and trendy interior. As I walked further into the bar, I couldn't believe my eyes when I recognized a familiar face behind the bar counter. It was Robert, the same man I had met at Tom's workplace. To my surprise, Robert, too, appeared taken aback but soon greeted me with a warm smile, saying, "Welcome, Emily, it's been a while." The manager, astonished, realizing the situation, Tom was shocked. He had assumed that they had come into a lot of money and had gone on a lavish trip abroad, but they couldn't withdraw the money, which led to his desperate call for help. Tom demanded that I send him the $68,000 immediately, but I firmly refused, reminding him that I had already given him the house and had fulfilled my obligations. During this exchange, Robert conveyed a message to me, asking if my big brother could pay for a bar tab of $2,000. I briefly explained the situation to Tom, but he hung up without listening. I apologized to Robert for the commotion but was met with a smile. He served me a cocktail and said, "This one's on me, don't hesitate. And for the boss, it's ginger ale, so no worries." We raised our glasses and toasted to the karma catching up with Tom. As it turned out, Tom had accumulated a significant debt due to his own reckless actions. While stranded overseas, a kind gentleman had approached him and lent him some money out of sympathy. Tom, in desperate need of cash, had accepted without considering the exorbitant interest rates. Consequently, his debt had ballooned to $338,000. However, the generous man who had helped him overseas had also offered him a job to repay the debt. Tom was now working on a fishing boat that operated globally. The house they had lived in was sold, and they now resided in a small apartment, living a frugal life. After the divorce, I continued to live with my stepfather at my childhood home. My often absent stepfather was home on this particular day, and we had a pleasant chat. I expressed my gratitude to him for his support and actions regarding Tom, to which he warmly responded. For a change of pace and some relaxation, I mentioned that I was thinking of going on a trip with my stepfather soon. Surprisingly, Robert would also be joining us on this trip. I had decided to marry Robert, and he was planning to meet my stepfather to convey his intentions. I believed that my kind stepfather and the sincere and earnest Robert would get along well. My stepfather smiled warmly and congratulated me on my decision, expressing his happiness. "Congratulations, Emily, I'm happy for you," he said, and I couldn't help but smile, feeling truly fortunate to have such a supportive stepfather.